everybody.
Hello.
Good morning, good day, or good afternoon, depending on wherever you are. A warm welcome to our panel discussion, Manufacturing at Crossroads. My name is Annette Trenz. I'm leading the global industries, and in that role, I'm responsible for the industry posture of CTI globally. Today, I have a wonderful panel with me, a panel of amazing women talking with me about the future of manufacturing. I'm super excited to introduce Stefanie Naujoks from IDC, Helena Jochberger, that you already met in the previous session, and Nicole Zethelius from CTI. But ladies, please introduce yourself. Stefanie.
Yeah, just without wondering who should start, right? So yes, Annette, thank you very much for the introduction already. So I'm Stefanie Naujoks. I'm a research director at IDC, and we are a global research and advisory company in the IT industry. And actually, my research area is digital transformation in the manufacturing industry and how basically digital technologies impact manufacturers' traditional processes and business models. So it's a pleasure to be here with you in the panel. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yes. Hello. I'm Nicole, and I'm the head of sustainability and ESG strategy global. I work on talking with the clients directly on the ground, I guess you could say. I come from over 10 years experience within sustainability, sustainable development, educated from Harvard University, have been a senior advisor at the United Nations Economic Commission, as well as IPCC on hard to abate sectors, specifically scope 3 emissions. That is myself in a nutshell.
Thank you.
And then I'll end this wonderful round here. Helena Jochberger is my name. I'm the global lead for the manufacturing industries, working together very closely with Annette, Trenz, and also Nicole on all the industry-related topics, and especially when we see with the digital transformation how much we are interfering also with other industries when transforming and when becoming sustainable. So I'm looking forward to this panel with you, ladies.
Thank you. So manufacturing is at a turning point. Just still recovering from a global pandemic, manufacturers find themselves navigating through the next challenge of a geopolitical crisis and disruption. So the question we're asking, are manufacturers ready to respond to these challenges? Let's start our discussion with the topic of geopolitical and economic changes. The geopolitical future is driven by US and China poles. While the driving forces of the economic growth has shifted to Asia, we have entered a global race in which technology and innovation is becoming key. Maintaining economic growth is the future challenge for developed countries. And faced with that polarization, the European Union will most likely focus on open economic and social policies to ensure both the access to markets and standards, having standards. So regulation frameworks will protect its own economic interest. And the European Union will most likely continue its very strong focus on regulations, from ensuring data privacy to fighting climate change. So my first question goes to Stefanie. How do you see the impact of standards for the future?
Yeah. So thank you, Annette. And first of all, I absolutely agree with what you just said. Actually, when we talk about standards are not only important when you look at technologies. It is actually, or standards are in particular important when it comes to sharing data. And I'm bringing that up because I strongly believe that whereas manufacturers today are really focusing on, making products good and engineer them super, in the future, it will no longer be enough to work just on their own. In the future, I believe it will be key to collaborate in ecosystems. And what will be key to collaborate in ecosystems will be sharing and exchanging data. And why is that key? That's simple, right? The more data you have, the more you can even increase the customer experience, the customer value, and even product quality or shop floor or factory operations. So, but the thing is, in order to exchange data, organizations need to agree on a common data model and a common data format, which ensures standardized semantics. And the good news here is that there are actually already a number of initiatives worldwide addressing standardization in the industrial context. But the thing is also that a key aspect of sharing data in ecosystem relates to trust and establishing trust. And this is actually a major concern and subject of many conversations I'm having with manufacturers, and also, and you touched upon that as well, data sovereignty will be key. And also here, we do see actually a quite promising example here, or an initiative here in Europe, Gaia X. And Gaia X has actually the goal to support data sharing in a secure and trusted environment while ensuring data sovereignty. And as IDC, we also did quite some interesting research on Gaia X, as I mentioned it. And what we found is that organizations, what they value or what they think are the benefits of Gaia X is mainly related to sharing data in a trusted environment, but also to securely connect different data pools. And what's also interesting, and what I wanted to share here is, as we're talking about it, is that not only manufacturers or organizations in Europe consider, for example, Gaia X as an important initiative, but also organizations in Asia Pacific and North America. But generally speaking, and to answer your questions, Annette, so definitely standardization, data standardization is a major topic in the manufacturing industry, but also having those frameworks such as Gaia X to ensure data sovereignty.
Excellent, Helena.
Yeah, that brings me already to another interesting topic or initiative that is going on, and that is mainly also under the umbrella of Gaia X. And this is called Catena X. And I think especially in the German-speaking countries, a lot of people that are aware of that data-driven manufacturing initiatives are also aware about Catena X. And I think this is also a very interesting example about data systems for sharing, for collaborating, and also for achieving various goals, right? So just collecting the data is, of course, never an end goal in itself. It furthermore tackles certain contextualization and other goals. So sustainability is only one to name. Yeah, Catena X has one working domain on sustainability, and we are having later on also a panel on that to discuss and enlighten that furthermore. The second aspect of data ecosystems is, of course, for manufacturers to thrive in the future and to have data ecosystems in place to generate new revenue streams. And we also see that clearly in our this year's Voice of the Client data, that generating new revenue streams while transforming is a big topic for them that they are discussing heavily. And last but not least, increasing the resilience. Annette touched on that at the very beginning. We are facing really a volatile, a VUCA world. And within that, it is really key to increase the resilience of organizations per se. And collaborative systems with the data underlying might help us, of course. So in a nutshell, of course, technology is an enabler. Data plays a crucial role and will furthermore. What worries me a little bit is when I see the transformation pace of our manufacturing community. Because compared to the other industries, we are lacking 8% points behind. Also data from this year's analysis, when it comes to producing results from digital transformation. Now we have this, I would say, very moderate evolution on the one hand side, and we have huge challenges on the other hand side. And so I would like to pose to Annette the question again, how do you see the latest challenges within that climate debate?
Climate debate is a big topic for manufacturers. Manufacturers are per se a highly energy consuming industry, and nearly every manufacturer has made a climate pledge, has published a climate pledge. So, however, climate change is not a siloed approach. So manufacturers are reaching out to their wider ecosystem in order to make sure that partners contribute to their own activities towards getting climate neutral, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, right? So also climate change is a large investment. It's a driver for transformation. It's really the true driver for transformation. And those who are able to adapt will gain competitive advantage from that. But Nicole, you worked for decades in that industry, in that area. What are the manufacturers telling you?
Yeah, on the ground, speaking with many clients in the past 6 months, and even to exacerbate on the volatile state of geopolitics and global supply chains, manufacturers must also address the new emerging legislation around sustainability and climate change. If we look at the EU taxonomies, CSRD and SFDR policies, it's only the starting point for what's to come. And parts of North America and the rest of the globe, especially Asia, are looking at making similar legislation around this area. And companies will need to prove externally with validated data their activities around environmental, social, anti-corruption, diversity on company boards, as well as sustainability factors on product governance. For example, things like reducing carbon emission and circularity. Now, part of the Green Deal, EU Green Deal, is pushing the financial sector and the manufacturing sector and other large companies to reduce their emissions by 35% by 2030. And a major lever in accomplishing this is transition to cleaner energy and renewable energy. However, we are in a current state of energy crisis in Europe and other parts of the globe. And with rising prices and not enough energy in certain areas, how is the manufacturing industry going to deal with this challenge moving forward if there is not enough green hydrogen, wind, or sun moving forward? And this is something that obviously we need to address not only as an industry, but externally, and that requires a lot of shareholder shared value cooperation. But sustainability is no longer merely an added value. It is now an imperative. It is an expectation that we have on business. And we need to consider economic, environmental, and social factors into our business, both short-term and long-term. The manufacturing industry needs to collect data around ESG, environmental social governance, along their entire value chain. And that is not only to report, but also to mitigate and make scalable change in these areas. And it all boils down to actionable data. So, Stefanie, what is IADC's take on sustainability?
Yeah. And Nicole, so you said it already, right? So basically, manufacturers must comply with sustainability regulations, and that are, of course, enforced by law, but also increasingly by customers and financial institutions and in the investor community. So my perspective as an analyst on this is that, again, whereas in the past, manufacturers used to design products based on products design based on costs and performance, and use this as a key selling argument and key selling factor going forward, this will change, right? The key selling factor in the future will be sustainability and recyclability. So that's a big change. And as you also touched upon, Nicole, is that companies will need to prove with external validated data their activities. And as an analyst in the IT industry, I mean, there are lots of digital technologies out there, and they will play a major role to support these efforts. So think about IoT technologies that enable track and trace solutions, or cloud-based platforms that enable the integration of relevant stakeholders in the supply chain or in the supply chain networks. And there are also increasingly applications that help to track and calculate CO2 emissions. So why am I saying that? So utilizing digital technologies and platforms enables manufacturers to, and as you said already, right, to reduce CO2 emissions basically in the supply chain, or they can help manufacturers to decarbonize their production. Or also super interesting is that digital platforms can enable manufacturers to engage in initiatives that which are either about reselling or reusing of remanufactured components. So just to mention a few examples here. And again, at IDC, we do quite some extensive research also on how sustainability is embedded in operations, or how manufacturers today embed that in their strategies and operations. And an interesting but not really super surprising topic here is that today sustainability is actually among the top business priority among manufacturers. However, there is a slight difference. So we see that manufacturers in EMEA and Asia Pacific are slightly ahead when it comes to, their focus on sustainability within their business priorities compared to North America. But that's only a slight difference. But I thought I'll mention that. But basically, and in a nutshell, from our perspective as an analyst, what has really changed compared to the past years is that sustainability has moved and entered the key strategic priorities of manufacturers.
Excellent. Just to build on what you just said, Stefanie, and this is absolutely congruent with our data. We see it both as top industry and business priority trend, the topic of sustainability. And as you mentioned, and to build on that, what you said is there are so many interesting aspects and technologies that we can use for that. Just to name only the example of additive manufacturing, right? Where, for example, in the aerospace industry, there are being parts produced with the help of 3D printing. Ergo, the parts are becoming much lighter. Ergo, you need less kerosene to start the aircraft. Ergo, you have less emissions coming from the aviation industry. And I think it needs a lot of creative potential and also innovative spirit to rethink the way we produce. And that goes really alongside the whole life cycle of the thing. So how do I source my raw material as manufacturer? How do I produce the parts? Which kind of wastage is getting there? Which kind of wastage am I producing in my own final assembly or production? And I think also the frontiers between B2B and to classical consumer are a little bit becoming a permeable membrane, if you know what I mean, in the sense of that we need to include within a customer experience also the user behavior, how users are using a system or a product. And what you just said, Stefanie, as well, how might we use raw material or parts that can be refurbished, reused, and remanufactured to really create a so-called circular economy, which is not really a super new topic, but it's gaining more and more in importance the longer we talk about that climate topic, right? And when I'm speaking about suppliers, raw material suppliers, parts suppliers, that obviously leads us directly to one of our next topics, the supply chains, which is really a big, big topic. Annette, a word on supply chains.
Yeah, thank you, Helena. From a supply chain perspective, we should start with the observation that globalization slows down. And the question is if deglobalization is prioritized in short term. The pandemic itself has demonstrated the fragility of global supply chains. And Russia's invasion in Ukraine has demonstrated again the global dependencies on economies, right, and supply chains. So, however, the need to adapt supply chains to become more resilient is imminent. Stefanie, how do you see how manufacturers react on that and what they are doing in order to achieve this resilience?
Yeah. So, Annette, as you said, supply chains today are super fragile, and there are still disrupted supply chains. So, thinking about COVID-19 and the strict lockdowns in Shanghai, in the port of Shanghai, and you mentioned it, the supply shortage due to the Russian invasion in the Ukraine, and actually local sourcing is something that we have been discussing with a lot of manufacturers, in particular for the last 2 years, or the past 2 years as a result of COVID. But actually, what we find is rather than relocating sourcing, what we observed is that measures rather relate to increasing stock levels or safety stock to avoid production standstill. So changing the sourcing strategies towards local sourcing certainly can be an option and part of a new overall sourcing strategy, but we do not consider it actually as a radical trend per se. And currently, actually, what we partially also see is that those what you were calling deglobalization strategies are partially failing due to the skyrocketing energy prices. And Nicole, you already mentioned the rising energy prices. And as a result, for quite some production sites, this can be a severe threat and can partially mean that there will be even temporarily production shutdowns, which again means that from those sites, no supply can be produced. But definitely for sure, appropriate sourcing strategies will be on the top of every supply chain manager and manufacturing organizations. And again, our research shows that for every fifth manufacturer in Europe, supply chain disruptions will actually the most global impactful trend they will have to face in the coming months and years. So we actually believe that given the current geopolitical situation and a business environment that will continue to be volatile and uncertain, for manufacturers, it will be above all, and you mentioned it already, Annette, it will above all be that they need to have resilient supply chain. And what are resilient supply chains? I mean, that sounds easier than this sounds easy, but it's not basically. But manufacturers will need to make their supply chains more transparent and more agile. And we do see manufacturers already investing in making their supply chains more agile. In fact, so 2/3 of manufacturers are heavily investing in that. So, and this includes, for example, investments in initiatives like making the execution of transportation more flexible, or this can also include making product designs more flexible, enabled by multiple sourcing of components, or this can also mean to implement inventory strategies that are more flexible, such as warehouse capacity, so sharing warehouse capacities. Or it can relate, of course, to supply diversification, not only on a tier 1 level, but also tier 2 and tier 3. So again, we are an IT analyst firm, and we observe for sure what the role of digital technologies play to make supply chains more resilient. And they play a key role, right? So just thinking about technologies like cloud platforms, again, IoT, data analytics, automation. So resilient supply chains is actually a key. for manufacturers today.
That brings me
Thank
maybe to a, sorry. Go ahead, Annette.
No, I just wanted to ask you for your opinion, Helena, on that.
Excellent. Yeah, just a few words on completion on what Stefanie just touched on. In the current voice of the client analysis, we also see that because we pose the questions whether is a certain repatriation of the production taking place, so bringing the production into the country, and there was not so much an impact. So it was a quite low number of manufacturers responding that this will be a key topic for them. Nonetheless, the reconfiguration and potentially also the shift towards other geographies, however, this is a topic that they were discussing quite heavily. So for us, it's also to see with curiosity, where will this be going, taking into account what you just said, the warehousing, all the technologies around enabling warehousing. And again, what we touched at the very beginning, also for ecosystems, how might we collaborate as ecosystems participants, maybe even competitors, to ensure our warehousing. We don't know where the journey will be going. Nonetheless, I think it's a very interesting one to perceive. Supply chains, I think, is one topic. It's not the only challenge that we are facing. When we ask our manufacturers, what is keeping you up at night? Of course, there comes very, very early the topic of the shortages in the workforce and the lack of talent that we are facing, and especially within the IT sector. So maybe Annette, from a more macro overview, what would you say towards these demographic changes?
Demographic changes has a major impact in the future, Helena, absolutely correct. According to the OECD, the world population will hit the 10 billion mark in 2050, less than 30 years from now. And the growth will come mainly from Africa, followed by Asia, while the developed countries are facing an aging population. The OECD countries will have the percentage of those 65 and older will increase from 17% to 25% in the upcoming years. And for the business, the impact is that we will face an even increased shortage on talent. At the same time, everything will become digital. So we need the new technology and the skills for these new technologies. So this forces the industry to rethink the integration of underrepresented populations into the labor market and to reconsider new concepts of learning and training. I guess this is something that you already mentioned on, Helena. Shortage of talent is what our manufacturers are facing already today, and it will be even worse in the future. So what's your take on that?
Mm-hmm. For me, it has mostly, I would say, two axes. So we are dealing with multiple generations under a rooftop of an enterprise, manufacturing enterprise, IT enterprise, you name it. So several generations means we need to find answers for these different generations, because not every generation has the same challenges, needs and requirements. So when I take into account, for example, generation Y and Z coming into the labor market, with a clear understanding about what they want in their work life, right? So on the one hand side, they are demanding, they're requesting, they're really knocking with their hands on the table. You need to answer us the question about how sustainable you are as a company. And only if you will answer the question to a satisfactory level, we as generation Y and Z will be willing to work for you. On the other hand side, we have the generation that is now becoming more and more aged. Call it Generation X, or still the baby boomers, but call it Generation X, that has years of experience, very experienced people, also in the manufacturing areas, that know the processes by heart, which are sometimes not always documented, and where I would say in a due diligence, there is no paper to be read, but it's all in their heads, right? And these people need to work even more and longer. So we also need to motivate them and to keep them in terms of data ecosystems, data literate, so that they know about data as a product and data and the power of data. And on the other hand side, it needs the right leadership. So at the end of the day, I would say it's leadership, it's the long life learning mindset that we all need, and motivation. And maybe with these three ingredients, we will be able to successfully drive through that path of workforce shortages. But I would like also to have Stefanie's opinion on that, because I'm pretty sure you have some more insights.
Yeah, I mean, they are they pretty much relate to what you just said, right? But I maybe have a different way of viewing the topic and how we do some research on that. So, but basically, I agree with everything you said. But the way I look at it as an analyst is that for sure, attracting and retaining talent is a key topic in manufacturing. So that's a key topic in every conversations we have with manufacturers, not only in IT, but also in the business areas, right? In engineering and production. So basically, I view this from two angles as well. So first thing is there is a skill gap in various areas, and this skill gap needs to be overcome. And then closely related to that is actually how to enable new ways of working, how to enable especially remote work concepts and hybrid work concepts. And talking very briefly about the skill gaps, and you said specifically the skill gap in IT, that's the same thing we observe, but there is also an increasing lack of capabilities of people who are able to develop smart and connected products. We quite see a number of industries where this is a problem, and the situation is in particular challenging in the automotive industry. So because whereas for large automotive OEMs, it's not really a challenge to get the right profiles of talented people, but it is a severe challenge for smaller automotive tier 3 suppliers. And if it's a problem for those, it will soon also become a problem for the automotive OEM. So that's a big issue, actually. And also, what's also a severe topic of a problem is that there is a lack of experienced service and maintenance engineers, because of a lot of them are reaching retirement age. And this particularly applies to industries such as oil and gas or chemical industries. And the thing is, as you were mentioning, the younger generation, that the younger generation, so the new talents, do prefer or have a tendency to prefer working in more glossy, fancy industries. So industries such as oil and gas or chemicals might have to go or to do some extra efforts to attract ambitious and right skill profiles. But so overall, as a result of that shortage of skills, again, digital technologies will play a major role to augment lesser trained and lesser experienced profiles. And we do see a lot of initiatives here in that area. So providing work instructions on smart glasses or providing relevant information on tablets so that lesser trained and less experienced workers can carry out tasks swiftly or make better decisions based on that information or data they get. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, so attracting and retaining talents goes basically hand in hand with enabling new ways of working, as the younger generations does expect that. And technically, this will be about enabling remote and hybrid work concepts. And the challenge here will actually be to provide the same experience to workers, whether they work on-site or whether they work remote. And the good side of things here is that on one hand, attracting talents become easier, as it doesn't matter anymore where people live. But the big challenge here is, and I haven't heard any best practices yet so far, but the big challenge is to onboard those new and remote staff, and organizations will have to come up with appropriate concepts. And so super critical topic. Lots of things need to be discussed here.
Yeah, and the question also is, will sustainability help in hiring and attracting new talent? And if we come back to the conversation about long-term strategy and decision making, as you said, Stefanie, we need to be able to educate and bridge that skill gap. So companies will need to find and consider ways to bridge the skill gap, as well as invest in their employees and communities, instead of relying on individuals to cover the time and cost to do that. They need to help develop the new skills needed in the workforce, as well as a manufacturer. If you can find what you have in the market today in terms of the right skills and competency, you need to find ways to invest and build upon that to find more, to develop more people. And you're definitely right. I completely agree. The hybrid way of working is normal now and expected post-pandemic for jobs that were office. But if we look at manufacturing, premises is still essential and necessary for, to be on the floor. And what we're seeing now is that the use of IoT to measure and to mitigate, and also to develop new safety measures for employees. And this is really interesting. But what I see in terms of sustainability overall is that businesses that are more transparent, that are more inclusive, that are more engaging with their employees are actually showing lower attrition rates. And this will make a big difference moving forward. Helena?
So yeah, I would say just a final conclusion there on what you just said, Nicole, especially about the transparency that leads us really to the way how an organization is structured, how the leadership personnel is treating the workforce, how the interaction between employee and employer is taking place, and also towards the degree of how flexible are they in taking also parts of the decisions and contributing also to the goal setting of a company. And I truly and I deeply am engaged in all that kind of leadership topics since 20 years. It's something that's really near to my heart. And I think also for manufacturers, we need to redefine the way we work. We become agile. We constantly train our people. So yeah, for sure, this will be ingredients to be successful in the future as manufacturer. Yeah. Back to you, Annette. When you hear us three talking, what are your thoughts on that?
It's fascinating to listen to your insights. Thank you very much, Stefanie, Nicole, and Helena. In order to allow our audience, our broader audience, to ask questions, I would like to ask you for your final conclusion. What is your recommendation, your key message for the manufacturers when they're returning after this event to their desk? What should they start doing Monday morning in order to secure their success? Maybe we can start with Stefanie.
Yeah. Annette, as you stated at the very beginning of the sessions, we are at a turning point in the history of manufacturing. And I think that's because I believe that manufacturers need to start to embrace the fact that the future will continue to be volatile and uncertain. So step number one, that's a fact, and that's different compared to the past. And therefore, manufacturers will have to ensure to have resilient operations. And not just in the supply chain, but also having a resilient workforce, having resilient back office operations. But what's also important is not just to ensure resilient operations starting as of Monday, but it's also important to ensure to have capabilities and strategies in place to build upon any changed conditions, because it's important to not just survive in the future, but also, and Helena, I'm quoting you here, it's also important to thrive. So that would be my conclusion here.
Very good points. To the industry and leadership, one thing to think about, or some things to think about and take away, is that the industry and leadership need to go beyond short-term decision-making and carbon tunnel vision. We need to look at long-term strategies that consider all possible impact outcomes. Sustainability is no longer an added value or something just nice to do. It is an imperative to business. And emerging legislation, geopolitical instability, supply chain disruption, the rise of carbon trade, shifting consumer behaviors even, are all intertwined and connected in corporate sustainability. And navigating through these shifts and balancing out economic and environmental and social pillars within the business requires relevant and actionable data. So that's my my last message to you, you all. Annette?
I would say the last word goes to Helena.
Oh, Helena.
Maybe in a nutshell, and I think that fits quite well to what you just said, ladies. Multi-criteria decision-making is one of the words I love most in volatile times. So now what does that mean? When you go back on Monday morning to your shop floor, to your factory, I would like you to take with you the message of scenario thinking. So what Nicole said, but also what Stefanie said, yes, it's of course all about data, but I need to contextualize the data and build different scenarios to which I can act upon. Yeah, the world is not really predictable. And that means we need to work in approximations, and therefore we need certain scenarios. And for sure, the reality will differ a little bit from the given scenarios. However, we can do this approximation and therefore become more resilient. So go back on Monday morning to your shop floor, talk about this scenario thinking with your business colleagues, with your IT colleagues, and ideally come up with a kind of a creation, ideation, design thinking workshop where you can work upon such scenarios for your specific environment. And that's my key takeaway for today. Back to you, Annette.
Thank you, Helena. Thank you, Stefanie. Thank you, Nicole. So if you want to ask question to the panel, please add your question into the chat. I'm going to open now another screen to see what questions did already arrive. Let me just check. Here's the first question. Someone would be interested to hear your perspective on whether sustainability and growth can both be achieved. Maybe that's a question, Nicole, that just shouts for you.
Yes, absolutely. But you need to find the right levers and the right areas of sustainability that are relevant to the company and within the company's reach, within the manufacturing that you do, their reach. If you're reaching for something that has nothing to do with your main purpose in a company, it makes it very difficult to make that profitable. But if you connect that and you integrate it within your business and make it part of your business model, absolutely. What we're seeing is companies becoming more successful, more lean in their operations, and just understanding their entire value chain much better. So absolutely, there is growth that can be achieved.
Thank you, Nicole.
I have
Stefanie,
actually
you
a very sorry. I have actually a very pragmatic view on that to add to Nicole, and as simple as that. So without I think that without being sustainable and without having sustainability embedded in operations, there will soon be no growth, right? Customers require it, financial institution requires it, law requires it. So it just needs to be embedded to achieve growth.
Thank you. Wonderful statement, Stefanie. Let's go to the next question. This all sounds great, but many manufacturers I know are really struggling against a backdrop of old machinery, data collected in multiple ways. In fact, very messy and complex requirements. Yet being data-driven feels like the way forward. How do we move forward? Maybe, Helena, that's a question for you?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the topic of the digital continuity within the core processes is really a question that drives a lot of manufacturers. So of course we are in the most seldom cases on a green field where we can design everything from scratch new and do not have our backpack of legacy. I think the important thing is, and we were discussing that also entirely with the data community within CGI, is to first of all have a look on where are your most important data sources. So which core systems, source systems are affected, and what is the purpose you would like to achieve with extracting data from that. So, but extracting different data from different source systems is only one task. The other task is to align that data and to form a so-called, I would say, golden data record. To really, no matter if you are having the hat of a COO on your head or if you are the CIO of a company, you need to have this golden data record. For the person who put this question, happy to get in touch with me. I'm happy to set up also a joint call for that topic of data drivenness, because within the remaining minutes, it's too complex to give a simple answer on that. I only can tell you data record, golden data record is a potential first answer, and using the concept of the digital twin may be a second answer in becoming data driven in manufacturing.
Thank you, Helena. I'm trying to address maybe one or two questions before we come to the end of the session. The next one is a very important one, I guess, as well. For us, security is the number one priority. Surely this is something all manufacturers are challenged with right now. So what is your perspective on that, Stefanie, talking to many manufacturers?
Yeah, so definitely. So every manufacturer I'm talking to, security is a key topic, and I'm actually wondering. I mean, we have talked a lot about supply chain and new ways of working, but I'm wondering whether cybersecurity has actually become an even greater threat than supply chain disruptions and supply shortage and skill shortage. And as we see, so we do see quite a lot of manufacturers and examples of manufacturers that had to stop their production due to cyber attacks. So just thinking about, I think it was last week, where again another agricultural manufacturer, so AGCO, has announced that they need to stop production because of a cyber attack. So cyber security should never, ever be underestimated, and manufacturers need to invest much, much more in that.
Helena, we got our latest voice of the client data this year. What are they saying with regards to cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's interesting that especially the C-level, so CXOs that have been interviewed about cybersecurity, they even state the OT and IT security priority higher even than the sustainability. So both priorities are very highly ranked, but if they needed to choose between the two, they would rather go for the security topic, saying the potential risks and the potential damage on production, reputation, and financial losses would be even higher rated. So I would absolutely underline that. And on top, when we look to the OT, the operational technology on the shop floor, this has been designed to produce at large scale, to be robust and to produce parts or products This technology has not been created with security implemented and security by design. So, of course, for the moment being, in that overlapping time in which we live, we have to take care of that. First of all, we have to assess where the back doors, the open doors are. Then later on, we have to mitigate the risks. And at the end of the day, then you have to take, as a CEO of a company, the rest level of risk to take, because that's, of course, an entrepreneurial decision to make, right?
Thank you so much, ladies. Stefanie, Naujoks from IDC, thank you for your insights. Helena and Nicole, it's a pleasure working with you together, and thank you for sharing your insights. We are at the end of our session. I would like to thank the audience for your interest, and we are entering now a 5 minutes break, and see us afterwards again. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful session. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.